monitoring a project and the result, etc. We had another time because there was a lot of question. So I will start with that, and afterwards maybe to concentrate on circular as such. So I will share my screen with you. Yep, here we go. I guess that you see my screen now. So basically, what I wanted to do now, and maybe to propose to you to do that, it's maybe to take more a bit of distance on the European University Alliances and on EU projects, and maybe try to really focus on what does that mean to be participating in the EU project or in any project, I would say, in higher education. And my starting point, in fact, would be maybe to reflect together on what does that mean um, to manage a change in the higher education sector. I'm sure that in your job, in your daily job, in your university, in your institution, you are facing on a daily basis some factors of changes. That's something that is, would say, normal to any human organization. And I think that especially in higher education and especially in the international sector, internationalization sector, it has been at the heart of what we are doing. So first, of course, as I was saying, higher education has been in a constant change in the last, I would say, at least 50 to 60 years. We know that the model that we had until recently in Europe in the 60s and 70s was in fact mainly based on the Middle Age. So this vision of having, a professor transmitting knowledge to the others, to student, and the student that have to, in a way, in order repeat what it is. So we know that from the 60s and 70s, things have changed a lot. And especially, of course, after the Cold War, etc. There have been new challenges, ideas, and opportunities. The world has changed. The world has opened. The world has become more globalized with more international opportunities for everybody, more connection to everybody. We're a society that we're more and more and is more and more based on knowledge, where we know that we have to have skilled people also to contribute to the society. There have been, of course, many movement of democratization in the 80s and 90s, with, as I was saying yesterday, still many challenges about democracy in the world, everywhere in every region of the world. And in higher education, of course, the massification, the fact of having more access to higher education has been also, I would say, new opportunities, and have also had an impact on what we are doing. So based on those challenges, when we analyze a bit what has happened, we have seen also that those challenges have been very quick, very fast, have been accelerating, are more and more complex, more diversified. And I think that's a sum of factor that as a university we are facing on a daily basis, that it's not always easy to manage and to know exactly what we can do with that, how we have to handle those changes. But those changes are there, and we have to do it in a way or another to really do something with that and see what we are doing. I use the term an hyper expansion of temporality. What does that mean? Is that for me, when you look at some changes are very quick and very, as I'm saying here, versatile, so very punctual. And it's all the things about the buzz that we can have around some ideas, and especially at the EU level, to be honest, we see from time to time one word, one buzzword that is starting to be in every document linked to education. And after you realize after 5 years that it was just an idea like this and it has disappeared. And it's true that it's something that it's sometimes difficult to really see what to do with that, if it's important or not, and how it will influence also education. And other are more, like I was here mentioning, funding change, really changes that will impact for good and for a long time, in fact, what we are doing in our university, in our institution. I'm thinking, for example, of AI, chat GPT and things like this are there to stay. It will change also the way that we are teaching, the way that students are learning. And I think those kind of changes will have an impact for the long term, and will also really change in the way how we are doing education, how we are thinking about research, how we are thinking of service to society. Um, Talking about those big changes, so those meta changes, we see that if we concentrate really on internationalization, in fact, internationalization as such has been a driver of change. We know that from the creation of the first university in Europe, of course, university have some international dimension. It was just per se the fact of being a place where we create knowledge. This knowledge is universal in a way or another. So implicitly, university, the first university were international. Of course, it was linked to the fact also of people moving, and already at the time of Erasmus, at the time of the first university in La Sorbonne, Salamanca in Spain, etc., people were moving from one university to another, also bringing some international dimension to university. And of course, this was mainly personal context, not really structural, but these, even if it was really personal and punctual, these elements were also bringing change in the university. And therefore, in a way or another, my perception, and as I've been working during many years with university and especially with international relation office, from my perspective, managing internationalization and the job that you are doing in your university, in fact, it's about managing change factors. And it's really about considering the changes that are there, how we can handle those changes, and how can we benefit also for that for our university. I will not be too long. I guess that you know that there have been many research in the last 15 years about internationalization of higher education, where basically I think that we have moved from something that was more seen as an objective as such, while now internationalization should be or is more seen as really a process of enhancing quality in education and research. The purpose is not only to bring students to be mobile or staff to be mobile or have other U projects, but basically we think by doing that, by with those tools, mobility, cooperation with other university, we are also changing, we are also enhancing the quality of what we are doing. And I think that again, this vision or this concept of internationalization, at least in the understanding that we have today, is really key, and is really, I would say, aligned with this change management that I want to touch upon today. And therefore, I think that it's not only about taking the responsibility of that, but it's also you as international relation officers, as a director for your department, as vice rector. It's also how are we also the change and how are we contributing to that. I'm not. It's not my field of research, but still, I want to share some theoretical elements linked to change management. As you might know, and I'm sure that some of you know more than I, since the 50s, there have been a lot of research on change management as a research field, not only in psychology, but also in management science, in social sciences, etc. And basically, it was not only about I would say more a scientific approach there to know what is change management and why we are changing, but it's also a more practical approach, especially in management science, to know how we can also manage change and what is really the purpose of that. And it's true that when you think about, I was saying in introduction, change is everywhere. And in any human organization and even in your private life, I'm sure changes are everywhere. And in a way, on a daily basis, we have to manage that. Uh, the issue from my perspective, I think, and I see that also in my experience when I was recruiting, young colleagues and things like this, is that it's not always a skill that we are able um, to really objectivize, and it's not always easy to find that. And generally, change management is more, we think that it's more for managers or head of unit or something like this. While from my perspective, in fact, everybody should be able also to manage change and really think about it in a more objective way. Um, so that's really basic. I will not go into, but what is a change? Moving from one state to another with some unknown effects, uncertain effects, etc. And the change management is basically to support all the operation within an organization to adapt to a change or changes. Um, this author, this French author Autissier, has prepared some paradigm, and in the history, I would say, of this research field, we see that it has moved from different approach. First, more from a sociological point of view, so really trying to analyze what is the environment about the change. Then in the 80s, it's more about instrumental paradigm, really looking at why, in fact, change is there and what is really the purpose of that. In the 90s, with the new public management and things like this, there have been many approaches linked to management and really managerial aspects. It was more practical approach in the research to see exactly how to manage change. This has continued the year 2000, and now more recently, the research has more, I would say, focused on what is the experience that we have when we are, in a way, you know, living a change or being a change, etc. And it's true that there have been many interesting scientific articles and also on this paradigm about experience, what is the experience of change management. But I will not go too much into detail about that. Again, that's just a typology of change, again, by this author Tissier with another author, French author Moutot. What is maybe interesting here is just to first, in this model, in fact, they are thinking and they are really looking at two dimension. First, the time. We know that some changes are coming very quickly, and other are coming very slowly. And then that's the first dimension here, vertical, and the horizontal one is about the intention. Some changes are intentional. There are some factors that are there to make the change, and some are implicit. And therefore, in fact, based on this grid, I would say, you can see that there are some different type of changes, from a prescribed change that is more long run, with an intention that is outside of your willingness in a way or another, and those that are more like adaptive change, where basically it's a more shorter term there, and there is really an intention to change there. Again, it's not for me just a guide of analysis for you. You just maybe to help you sometime when you are facing some changes there. But of course, there are plenty of other typology that have been developed in the research literature. That, for example, also include the externality of the dimension of the change, also how formal informal is the change, knowing also the rhythm, the driver, etc. But again, all those guides, in fact, help you maybe to really approach what is changing in your university. That's a model that I really like. In fact, that's an American author, Levins, that have developed this model, unfreeze, change, and refreeze, where basically, in fact, the assumption is that change, everything is perpetually changing. So we are just replacing from one state to another. And that's quite of interesting also because from my perspective, it puts also some kind of a distance about the changes, and not all the changes should have the same impact, should not be necessarily so difficult, because anyway there will be a change, then there will be another change, then again another change, etc. So I think that in this perspective it's kind of interesting to see that. And here you see those three states when the change started, what the Levin called the unfree states. There is of course a gap between what you know now and what it should be, and therefore you can reconsider the situation, and therefore if you reconsider that there is some legitimation there, then the change is happening, so you prepare and experiment that. And when you see that, generally you will have two situation or two state at the same time. That's typically, again, to give an example, I don't know if you have started really to digitalize all your processes inside your university about managing mobility. It's not from one day to another that everything will be called digitalized. You will have some coexistence of practices, which is totally normal. And afterwards, again, taking the example of digitalization, if you go really further in the process, then the digitalization of your process will be really the new state, and you will have also to adapt the practices that you have, and in a way or another you return to some stability until, of course, a new change that might happen in the future. So again, that was more to give you some, ideas and introduce about the importance of thinking about the fact that, in fact, on the daily basis, we are confronted with change management, and we have to see that. Why I'm telling you all that? Because in fact, from my perspective, when you are starting to work with other colleagues in cooperation process project, in EU project, etc., you will see more and more that you will be asked to monitor the change, to evaluate the change, and see how you can learn from that. In Circle U from the start, and I will mention a bit now what have been the approach in Circle U. From the start, in fact, and under, I would say, the impulse of King's College London, we had a strong, I would say, dimension about monitoring, evaluation, and learning. The idea really, and I think it was more the Anglo-Saxon approach there from King's that was there, is to say, okay, we want to go together with this alliance. We want to work together. We want potentially to change also some of the aspect that we have inside our university. We want to contribute to larger policy development, etc. That's really good. But how do we do to make sure that in fact we are on a good track? And to make sure, in fact, that we are on a good track, it's really simple. We have to monitor the changes. We have to evaluate that. And from the evaluation that we have, we can learn some elements and then change again what we are doing. So it's kind of simple, but I think that it's really crucial. So in our case, and I think it's in most of the project where you have a strong monitoring and evaluation dimension, it's about, of course, looking at the objective and see if at the end of the day you fulfill the objective that you have set initially. It's to see also how you are using the resources. In our case, we are receiving money from the EU. How are we using that? We know that every university is also putting resources, how they are using that, and what is really the effect, how efficiently we are using that. It's also about helping the decision. So to give a really concrete example, at every meeting with our rectors and president, they are meeting at least twice or three times a year, the rectors and presidents of CQU. We have what we call a MEL report, so a monitoring, evaluation, and learning report, where basically, in fact, we show them some data. We show from those data what we think that we have realized, if we are on good tracks or not, and we ask them to see, okay, what should be um, well, the evolution that we want. Do we have to change some things? Do we have to adapt some things, etc.? And last but not least, very importantly, of course, is the sustainability of what we are doing. And of course, I would say that that's something that in the case of Circular, we decided to give a strong emphasis there. But as you know, in every EU project, you will have to report to the Commission, you will have to use key performance indicators and things like this. So it's something that, in fact, is very present also when you are engaged in a project with some external funding. So I guess that you heard all those words. To be honest, again, I'm not a specialist in those aspect of monitoring and evaluation. In my team, I have a colleague, Audrey, that is really in charge of specifically this work. But what is important for me is just to realize in a way that there are different tools that have different purposes. And I think that based on that, maybe to choose the one that you think are the best or the best fitted, in fact, for what you are doing. The European Commission and all the projects are using a lot those KPIs, the key performance indicators, which are basically metrics, mostly quantitative one, but sometimes also qualitative one. And basically, it's about to see where we are. So what is the progress that we made in the project? And they are really the one helping from one moment to another to see where we are. I like this author that is comparing the KPIs to the road signs. And indeed, you are in a project, you are driving a road, and you have some road signs telling you where you are exactly. We have SMART goals. So SMART are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. I'm sure that you know that because in many projects, it's usual to develop SMART goals. And basically, it's to give you, in fact, the frame in which you are doing your project. So as this author was saying, it's the vehicle. So it's where, in fact, you think that you are heading to, and that's the vehicle in which you are using to reach its goal. Key result areas are really close, in fact, to KPIs. Basically, it's to see to focus more on areas there, to see on which track you are. So they are really linked to KPIs. And last but not least, the objective and key results are the one that really put the frame. So it's really the horizon where you are going, the ultimate destination that you want to go. Again, it's not super important from my perspective to really concentrate too much right now on that, but it's just to give you some ideas, some insight, and again, underline the importance to really think about that. Um, in Circle U, if I end up with that, so as I told you from the start, we had a strong approach towards MEL, so what we call MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And basically, as I told you, in fact, this idea is really to have more evidence and have really information that is evidence-based to reflect all together, to revise what we are doing, to measure the progress that we have, and at the end of the day, in fact, make sure that we are, in fact, on good tracks, as I was saying, fulfilling the objective. And also what is really crucial for us, and I think it's something that we don't see very often, is to generate knowledge. So it's not only to say we are good, etc. It's also to say, okay, on one stage, this is not working. How do we adapt ourselves? How do we do to change also the path that we are in to make sure that we are realizing the objective there? So I will not go too much into details, just to tell you that indeed there are a strong dimension about really the evidence and the data collection. So my colleague Audrey is very much involved into on the daily basis, collecting data amongst the different colleagues in the NAN university, looking at the different activity that we have, make sure that to know, how many participants we had, what was also to have some survey after satisfaction survey and things like this. And those data basically are more objective information that will help us afterwards to evaluate, in fact, what we are doing. As I told you, based on that, in fact, we are able to provide this information to our decision maker. So the vice rector, vice president, and things like this, also president and rectors, and to make sure that in a way or another, they see where we are, they can take strategic decision to maybe change some aspect of the journey we are in, and make sure that we can really, at the end of the day, and that's the ultimate goal, really to deliver the strategic objective that we have. And that's in a way or another, again, the goal, the horizon that we have. And last but not least, and that's something that is in a way very challenging, is also to establish this kind of evaluative culture inside the universities. And to be really transparent with you, this is really complicated because it will be linked also to the culture of each universities. Some universities do not have at all this kind of evaluative culture. They do not have this kind of, monitoring and evaluation approach inside the university. And therefore, we are trying also by pushing that at the level of the alliance, trying also to push that and some evolution inside their own university. I will not go too much into detail. My colleague Audrey, if you are interested, I'm really happy to connect with her if you are interested there. So we have a strategy, basically setting a bit, the vision that we have about Mel. We had what we call the theory of change. I will show you that logic model where basically, in fact, we are setting the final objective and we are anticipating the different causal relation between some inputs, some outputs, etc. But I will show you just afterwards. Based on that, we have what we call the result framework, where basically it's about a framework that all the colleagues are using about the different data and indicators that we want to provide, and make sure that in a way or another there is a process um, to really evaluate, sorry, and also collect the data about that. So the theory of change, it's this one. So it's really scary. And when we were presenting that to colleagues, it's like really sometimes a bit scary to see that. But again, the details are not important. The importance from my perspective to see that on one side you have outcome and input, and what we are trying to do is to anticipate and already reflect from a theoretical point of view what are the inputs or the activity that we are about to develop or that we are developing, what will be the impact in terms of outputs. For example, I don't know, we are receiving money from the EU. Based on that, we are developing a mobility framework, an approach to mobility. We hope that afterwards, in terms of inputs, it will increase the number of students being mobile, having more students are mobile. We hope in a way or another that it will increase the international exposure of students, that it will, at the end of the day, make that those students have more skills for the future of Europe and to help also to face challenges. And at the end of the day, the impact is to say that basically Circle U is really contributing to a societal challenge. So it's really simple, not simple, but it's just a way to already think out of the box. What are we doing? What are we are planning to do? What will be the effects on a short-term, long-term, mid-term, and long-term perspective? And with that, in fact, it's a bit the logic that we have in Circle U, and that's a reference document that we share. So as I told you, we launched that more than 3 years ago. It's still difficult to really reflect on if this mail strategy is effective. What we see first is that one of the challenges about obtaining good quality data. There are many activities in Circle U that are managed locally by each university, and you can imagine that trying to coordinate all that maybe could be very, very difficult. And the fact of if in a way we don't have good quality or relevant or standardized data, in a way or another we are blind. And so it's something that we are really working on to make sure that we can have data that are comparable. We need to, so the commission likes to have quantitative data, numbers and numbers and numbers. But what we try to do also is really to balance that with qualitative data. That's why we have a lot of survey, also a lot of, interviews with the people participating to that. It takes time, but at least it provides more, I would say, rich picture about what we are doing. as I told you, what is really difficult also and challenging is that yes, we can have a good monitoring and evaluation framework for the alliance, but yes, within each of the university, it's all not always the case, and that was this evaluative culture that does not necessarily exist in every university, and therefore, if at the local level they don't have really this culture, it makes it difficult that people really own and understand what we are doing. And last but not least, in all the project, EU project, and I'm sure you know that, we heard yesterday the question about performance-based funding and things like this. Sometimes people are just tired of, providing data, collecting data, and things like this. And we see that we have to be careful, not to make too much pressure on people, because at the end of the day, they will not see the ultimate goal. They will just see the fact that we are just bothering them with, again, asking more data to make evaluation and things like this. So yeah, that was it for this presentation. I know that maybe it's a bit not directly linked to the subject of European University Alliance.